My name is Thomas Gallagher, and I have been diving in the world's most unforgiving and dangerous waters for over 20 years. Navy SEAL Team, cave diving in Yucatan, commercial saturation diving in the North Sea. Nothing prepared me for what I found 2,100 feet below the surface of Crater Lake in Oregon, beneath a 50-foot slab of concrete that had been dumped there in 1943. If you've visited Crater Lake, you know it's incredibly blue and pristine. The water is so clear that on a good day, you can see 140 feet down. What you may not know is that the lake has been off-limits to recreational diving since 1987, and the northern quarter has been a completely restricted zone since World War II. If you ask for the official reason, it's to preserve the lake's extremely sensitive ecosystem. The real reason is that there's a second crater they don't want anyone to find. Before continuing, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Those who want to support us further can become Super Hatton, which is extremely important for our development. Now, if I continue, I'm violating the federal confidentiality agreement by telling you all this, and I'll probably lose my pension. Who knows? Maybe I'll even be prosecuted. But after what happened to the research team last month, after what came out of the concrete, someone needs to know the truth. I came to Crater Lake in 2004, fresh out of commercial diving, looking for something quieter after 8 years of decompression chambers and North Sea storms. The National Park Service needed experienced technical divers for their research and recovery operations. The pay was government standard, which meant terrible, but the location was paradise. Or so I thought. My first indication that something was off came during orientation. Dr. Patricia Mills, the head of aquatic research, pulled me aside after the standard safety briefing. "Tom, I need to be clear about something," she said, her voice lower than necessary in the empty conference room. "Your credentials are impressive. That's why you're here. But there are areas of the lake that are absolutely off-limits, even to you. Especially to you." I laughed. After diving to 600 feet in the North Sea, after recovering bodies from submarine disasters, what could possibly be off-limits in a volcanic lake in Oregon? "The North Quadrant," she continued, pointing to a laminated map on the wall. "From Cleetwood Cove to Pumice Point. No diving, no sonar mapping, no exceptions. It's been restricted since 1943. Ecosystem protection?" I asked, though something in her expression told me otherwise. "Sure," she said, but her eyes said something different. Ecosystem protection. The first few months were routine. I led tourist dive groups in the approved areas, conducted water quality tests, helped with the occasional search and rescue. Crater Lake was everything the brochures promised. Pristine, untouched, almost supernatural in its clarity. The water was so pure, it was actually painful to keep your eyes open in it without a mask. But I kept noticing things that didn't add up. First was the old man of the lake. If you don't know, it's a 30-foot hemlock log that's been floating vertically in the lake for at least 120 years. It moves around the lake seemingly at random, sometimes against the wind, sometimes in dead calm. The tourists love it. The scientists explain it away as a unique balance of waterlogged wood and temperature differentials. But I watched it for weeks, tracked its movements. The old man wasn't moving randomly. It was patrolling. It would drift toward the North Quadrant, reach an invisible boundary about 200 yards from the restricted zone, then turn back. Every time. Like it was programmed, or warned, or afraid. Then there were the sonar readings. Crater Lake's maximum depth is officially 1,943 feet, measured at a point called Deep Rover. But when I was doing routine bottom mapping in the approved zones, I kept getting ghost returns, faint echoes suggesting something deeper, something that shouldn't exist in a volcanic caldera. I started doing my own research in my off hours. The lake's geological history is well documented. Mount Mazama erupted 7,700 years ago, collapsed in on itself, and gradually filled with rain and snowmelt. Simple. Clean. Except volcanic calderas don't typically have secondary formations 200 feet below their primary bottom. And they definitely don't have perfectly circular depressions that look more like impact craters than volcanic features. The real breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Jim Harrison, a maintenance worker who'd been at the park for 30 years, found me one night at the Rim Village cafeteria. He was drunk, which was unusual for Jim, and he had something to tell me. "You're the new dive guy," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "The one with all the Navy credentials." I nodded. "My dad worked here during the war," he continued, his words slightly slurred. "Construction crew. Civilian contractor for the Navy." That caught my attention. The Navy? At Crater Lake? Jim pulled out his phone, scrolled through photos until he found what he was looking for. A black and white image of men in 1940s work clothes standing next to what looked like industrial pumping equipment. Behind them, Wizard Island was clearly visible. "December 1942, Jim said, right after something fell into the lake. Dad said they heard it all the way in Klamath Falls, a sound like thunder that went on for 30 seconds. When they got here, there was a new hole in the ice, perfectly round, about 50 feet across, and the water around it was glowing green." I studied the photo. The men looked exhausted, haunted. What did they do? First, they tried to deny it happened. Then, when people kept asking questions, they said it was a meteorite, natural phenomenon. But Dad knew better. He saw them bring in the diving bells, the Navy hard hat divers. They went down for 2 weeks straight, working in shifts. Then one day, they all came up at once, packed their gear, and left. What did they find? Jim took another drink. Dad never knew for sure, but 3 days after the divers left, the real construction began. They brought in cement trucks, hundreds of them, ran them 24 hours a day for 6 months, poured concrete directly into the lake through pipes, 50,000 tons of it, Dad estimated. "That's impossible," I said. "That much concrete would be visible. It would change the lake's whole profile." "Not if you poured it into something deeper," Jim replied. "Not if you were filling something that went down another 200 feet below the main crater." He showed me another photo. This one showed men in military uniforms standing next to what was clearly a Navy vessel on Crater Lake. "They brought in a submarine," Jim said, "in pieces, on trucks. Assembled it on the shore, launched it. It was in the lake for 3 weeks before they took it apart and hauled it away." "What were they looking for?" Jim shrugged. "Dad asked once. His supervisor, a Navy commander, just said, 'We're making sure it stays down there. That's all.' I should have left it alone. Should have forgotten Jim's stories, done my job, collected my pension, but I've never been good at leaving mysteries unsolved. So I started planning. The North Quadrant was off limits, but the boundaries of the restriction were clearly marked on nautical charts. I could get within 200 yards legally, and modern side-scan sonar could see a lot further than 200 yards. I waited for a maintenance day when the lake would be closed to tourists. Told Patricia I was doing routine equipment checks on the research boat. She didn't question it. I'd been there 6 months, proven myself reliable. The morning of October 15th, 2004, I took the boat out just after sunrise. The lake was glass smooth, reflecting the crater rim in perfect detail. Even the old man was still, standing sentinel about a half-mile away. I anchored at the edge of the restricted zone and deployed the side-scan sonar. The first few passes showed what I expected, the steep walls of the caldera descending to the known bottom at 1,943 feet. But as I adjusted the angle, aiming it toward the center of the north quadrant, everything changed. There was a second crater, perfectly circular, about 300 feet in diameter, beginning at the 1,943-foot mark and descending to. The sonar couldn't find the bottom, but at approximately 2,100 feet, there was something else. A massive, flat surface that reflected the sonar waves like metal or concrete. I was adjusting the settings, trying to get better resolution, when I heard it. A sound coming through the hull of the boat. It was rhythmic, mechanical, like Morse code but slower. Tap, 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 pause, tap, 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 pause, tap, tap. It was coming from below, from beneath the concrete. I recorded everything. The sonar readings, the sound patterns, even the strange magnetic fluctuations my equipment was picking up. The boat's compass was spinning slowly, counterclockwise, even though we weren't moving. That's when the old man of the lake began to move. Not its usual drift, but purposeful, direct movement. It was coming toward me, against the wind, leaving a wake like a living thing. I watched, fascinated and terrified as it approached the boat, bumped against the hull once, gently, then began pushing me away from the restricted zone. I didn't resist. I pulled up the sonar, started the engine, and let the old man guide me back to safe water. When I looked back, it had returned to its position at the boundary, standing guard once again. That night, I developed a fever. Not a normal fever. My temperature would spike to 103, then drop to 95, cycling every few hours. I had dreams of falling through dark water, of cities beneath the lake, of something vast and patient waiting behind walls of concrete. And through it all, that sound. Tap, 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 pause, tap, 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 pause, tap, tap. When I recovered 3 days later, I found a note under my door. No signature, just a single line. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Stop looking, or become part of what's hidden. But I couldn't stop. The sound haunted me. I started researching everything I could find about December 1942, about things falling from the sky, about Navy operations in the Pacific Northwest. And what I found changed everything I thought I knew about World War II, about Crater Lake, and about what we're really protecting in our national parks. The official records are heavily redacted, but pieces survive. On December 7th, 1942, exactly 1 year after Pearl Harbor, something entered Earth's atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean. It was tracked by 3 separate radar stations, moving at impossible speeds, changing direction in ways that violated physics. It was headed east toward the American mainland. The military scrambled fighters from McCord Field, but they couldn't intercept it. It was too fast, too high. Then, at 02:47 hours, it suddenly descended, almost vertically, directly into Crater Lake. The impact was detected by seismographs as far away as San Francisco. But when dawn broke, the lake looked exactly the same, except for a perfectly circular hole in the ice, exactly as Jim's father had described. What fell into Crater Lake that night wasn't a meteorite. It wasn't a weapon. It was something else, something that chose this location specifically, and whatever it was still active. Still transmitting. Still trying to communicate from beneath 50,000 tons of concrete. The tapping pattern I recorded? I ran it through every cipher I knew from my Navy days. Nothing. Then, on a hunch, I tried something else. I converted the taps to binary. Short tap equals 0, long tap equals 1. It was coordinates, latitude and longitude. The coordinates led to a point in the Pacific Ocean, approximately 2,000 miles west of Oregon. There's nothing there. No islands, no seamounts, just empty ocean 15,000 feet deep. But according to declassified Navy records, That exact location is where they lost a submarine in 1944. The USS Scorpion, on a classified mission, reported encountering something beneath the surface, something that shouldn't exist. Their last transmission, "It's not from here." Crater Lake. God help us, it's connected to Crater Lake. The submarine was never found. The Navy claimed it was sunk by a Japanese destroyer, but no Japanese records support this. The truth is, they didn't know what happened to it. But I was beginning to understand. Whatever fell into Crater Lake in 1942 wasn't alone. It was part of something larger, something that exists partially in our world and partially somewhere else. The concrete seal isn't keeping it in, it's keeping us out, or maybe more terrifyingly, it's keeping something else from coming through. I kept diving, kept researching, but more carefully now. I knew I was being watched. Park security seemed to always know where I was. My internet searches were monitored. I could tell by the way certain websites would time out only when I was researching specific topics. Someone, or something, didn't want me to know the truth. But the truth has a way of surfacing, especially in a lake as clear as Crater. The first person to disappear was Dr. Patricia Mills herself. It was March 2005, 5 months after my encounter at the restricted zone. Patricia had been acting strange for weeks, arriving at work earlier, leaving later, spending hours staring at water quality data that couldn't possibly be that interesting. Then one morning, her office was empty. Not just empty, sanitized. No personal items, no research notes, no sign she'd ever been there. The official story was family emergency, extended leave, very sudden, but her car was still in the employee lot. Her apartment in Klamath Falls still had fresh milk in the refrigerator. And according to her cell phone records, which I may have illegally accessed through a Navy buddy, her last call was to a number that didn't exist. Not disconnected, not out of service. The number literally wasn't in any telephone system on Earth. Her replacement arrived within 6 hours. Dr. Marcus Webb, supposedly transferred from Yellowstone, but his credentials were too perfect. His knowledge of Crater Lake too specific. He knew things about the lake that weren't in any published research. And his eyes. They reflected light wrong, like a cat's, but only when he thought no one was looking. "Tom," he said during our first meeting, "I understand you've been conducting some independent research." I played dumb, just trying to understand the lake better. "It's a fascinating ecosystem." "Indeed it is," he replied, his smile not reaching those strange eyes. "But some aspects of that ecosystem are quite delicate, quite dangerous if disturbed. I trust you understand the importance of following protocols." The threat was subtle but clear. I nodded, pretended to comply, but I was already planning my next move. See, I'd made a discovery in Patricia's abandoned office. Hidden behind a loose panel was a single USB drive containing sonar readings she'd taken over the past year. But these weren't from Crater Lake's main basin. These were from the second crater, the one beneath the concrete. Patricia had found a way to penetrate the seal using low-frequency sound waves, mapping what lay beneath. The images were impossible. Structures, geometric, artificial structures at 2,300 feet, far below the concrete seal. They looked like buildings, or machinery, or something between the two. And they were arranged in a perfect spiral pattern around a central point that appeared to be generating its own light. According to the timestamp, these readings were taken just 3 days before Patricia disappeared. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The sonar had also captured movement. Large objects, maybe vehicles, maybe creatures, moving through the water beneath the seal. Moving in patterns that suggested intelligence, purpose. And according to the acoustic signatures, they were made of materials that didn't match anything in our databases. Not metal, not organic, something else entirely. I needed to get down there, not to the second crater, that was impossible with the concrete seal, but close enough to see for myself what Patricia had discovered. And I knew exactly how to do it. Every year, the Park Service conducts a deep maintenance dive to inspect the underwater monitoring equipment. It's the only time anyone is authorized to dive below 300 feet in Crater Lake. As the senior dive supervisor, I could assign myself to the team. Dr. Webb couldn't object without raising questions. The dive was scheduled for April 15th, 2005. I had 3 weeks to prepare, to modify my equipment, to figure out how to investigate without getting caught. I also needed a dive partner I could trust, someone who wouldn't report irregularities. I found him in Jake Martinez, a young ranger who'd been asking too many questions about the North Quadrant restrictions. "You know something's wrong here," I told him, over beers at the Prospect Hotel. "You've seen the classified zones, the military presence that shouldn't exist in a national park." Jake nodded slowly. "My grandfather was Klamath." He told me stories about this lake, about why the tribe never fished here, never swam here. They called it the Lake of the Inverted Mountains, said there was another world beneath the water, a mirror of our own, but wrong, twisted. Want to see if he was right? Jake didn't hesitate. "When do we dive?" April 15th came gray and cold, with a mist that turned the lake into a void of blue-white nothing. Perfect conditions for what we planned. The official dive was to inspect monitoring station Delta 7 at 400 feet, but Delta 7 was only 500 yards from the edge of the second crater. With the right equipment and timing, we could reach it. We descended slowly, following protocols for the first 200 feet. The water was so clear it felt like flying through blue space. At 300 feet, the pressure began to affect our equipment in strange ways. My dive computer started showing impossible readings, negative depths, times that hadn't happened yet, water temperatures that fluctuated between freezing and boiling. At 400 feet, we reached Delta 7. I signaled to Jake, and we began our real mission. We swam north, toward the Forbidden Zone, our modified rebreathers giving us the gas mix we needed for the depth. The water grew colder, denser, and something else. Charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. At 450 feet, we saw the edge. The main crater's bottom simply ended, dropping away into a perfect circular void. But it wasn't dark down there. There was light, a sick, greenish phosphorescence that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, and the water itself was different. It shimmered, twisted, formed patterns that hurt to follow with your eyes. Jake tapped my shoulder, pointed down. There, perhaps 100 feet below us, was the concrete seal. But it wasn't solid anymore. Cracks ran through it like a spider web, and through those cracks, that green light pulsed rhythmically, like breathing, like a heartbeat. I deployed my camera, started recording. Through the zoom lens, I could see more details. The cracks weren't random, they formed patterns, symbols, almost like writing. And there was something else. Movement beneath the concrete. Shadows that didn't match any fish or debris, shadows that moved with purpose. Then we heard it. The same tapping I'd heard months before, but louder, clearer. It was coming from directly below us, from something pressed against the underside of the concrete. But now I could hear more. Voices. Hundreds of voices, speaking in languages that predated human speech, singing songs that made my bones resonate. Jake grabbed my arm, pointed to his gauge. We were almost out of bottom time. But as we turned to leave, I saw something that still haunts my dreams. A face, human or once human, pressed against one of the larger cracks in the concrete. The eyes were gone, replaced by that green phosphorescence. The mouth was open in a silent scream or song, and I recognized it. It was Patricia Mills. She saw me, I know she did. Her mouth moved, forming words I could somehow understand despite the water, despite the impossibility. Don't let them surface. The seal is failing. 2 more months, maybe less. They're not from here. They're from below, from the first Earth, from before the sky changed. Stop them, or join us. Then she was gone, pulled back into the green light by something I couldn't see and didn't want to. We ascended fast, too fast, risking decompression sickness in our need to escape. At 200 feet, Jake started convulsing. Nitrogen narcosis, I thought at first, but his eyes had that green tint, and when he spoke, it wasn't his voice. "The deep ones remember," he said in a tone like grinding stone. "Before your kind walked, we swam. Before your sun burned, we dwelt in the dark between stars. The gate opens soon. The concrete cannot hold. 7.7 thousand years of waiting end now." Then Jake was himself again, gasping, terrified. We made it to the surface, to the dive boat where Dr. Webb was waiting. "Equipment malfunction," I reported. "Had to abort the inspection." Webb studied us, those cat eyes seeing more than they should. "Of course. These depths can be treacherous. Perhaps you should restrict yourself to shallower waters from now on." That night, Jake disappeared. His room was empty, his gear gone. The official report said he transferred to another park, but I knew better. I'd seen what happened to those who saw too much. Patricia, now Jake. I would be next unless I was very careful. I developed the footage from the dive in secret, using an old film lab in Portland where I knew the owner wouldn't ask questions. What it showed confirmed everything and explained nothing. The structures beneath the seal were clearer in still frames, definitely artificial, definitely inhabited, and in one frame, caught by accident as I panned the camera, something huge moved through the green light. It had tentacles, or cables, or both. It had eyes that were also machines. It was impossible and absolutely real. I started researching everything I could about December 7th, 1942. Not Pearl Harbor, the other December 7th, the one at Crater Lake. I found fragments in military archives, witness testimonies that were never officially filed. A farmer in Fort Klamath reported seeing a star falling upward just before the impact. A Native American elder spoke of the sky opening backwards. A child in Medford drew pictures of angels made of metal and water the night it happened. But the most revealing discovery came from an unexpected source. In the Klamath County Library, in a book about local geology that hadn't been checked out since 1963, I found a handwritten note tucked between pages about Crater Lake. They didn't come from space. They came from below. The impact was an eruption, not a crash. Check the seismic records for December 6th, not December 7th. I did, and what I found changed everything. On December 6th, 1942, at 11:47 p.m., seismographs across the Pacific Northwest recorded something unprecedented. Not an earthquake, but a regular, rhythmic pulsing from deep within the earth. It lasted exactly 3 hours and 33 minutes, ending at 3:20 a.m. on December 7th. 7 minutes later, the object entered Crater Lake. It hadn't fallen from the sky. It had been pushed up from below, from deep within the earth, emerging through the lake because the water provided the path of least resistance. The Navy knew this. That's why they sealed it with concrete instead of trying to retrieve it. They weren't keeping something in, they were keeping something from coming out. But concrete doesn't last forever, especially not when what's beneath it has been patiently dissolving it for 63 years. I compiled everything: photos, sonar readings, historical documents, Patricia's research, onto encrypted drives. I hid copies in 5 different locations, sent one to a journalist I trusted, kept one with me always. I knew they were watching me now, knew my time was limited. The last straw came in June 2005. I arrived at work to find a new assignment waiting. Immediate transfer to a research station in Alaska, effective immediately, non-negotiable. They were removing me just like Patricia and Jake, but I wasn't going quietly. That night, I broke into the restricted zone. I took a kayak, no motor to alert security, paddling through moonless darkness guided only by GPS. The old man of the lake was there, as always, but this time it didn't try to stop me. It just watched, a silent sentinel that had given up its post. When I reached the coordinates directly above the second crater, I dropped a weighted camera, letting it sink to the concrete seal 2,100 feet below. What it recorded in those depths still gives me nightmares, but also hope. Because while the seal is failing, while those things are trying to break through, something else is fighting them. The old man of the lake isn't just a log. It's a marker, a warning, placed there by the Klamath people generations ago when they first discovered what lurked beneath. It's been treated with substances that repel the deep ones, keep them contained, but it's dying, waterlogged, losing its power. And when it finally sinks, when that last guardian fails, the seal won't matter anymore. The camera I dropped recorded for exactly 47 minutes before something destroyed it. But those 47 minutes revealed the truth about what's been hiding beneath Crater Lake since before recorded history. The footage started normal enough, darkness giving way to that green phosphorescence as the camera descended past 2,000 feet. The concrete seal came into view at 2,100 feet, just as expected. But the cracks were wider now, some large enough for a person to fit through. And through those gaps, the camera captured something that shouldn't exist. A city, an inverted city, built into the rock beneath the lake, hanging like stalactites but with purpose, with design. The architecture was wrong, angles that folded in on themselves, surfaces that were simultaneously convex and concave, structures that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. And it was inhabited. The things that moved through that city weren't human, had never been human. They were something older, something that evolved in the deep places of the earth before the continents formed. Some looked like jellyfish made of living metal. Others resembled mechanical squids with too many eyes. But the worst were the ones that looked almost human until you noticed the details. The extra joints, the gills that were also mouths, the eyes that opened into infinite depth. And they were building something. A machine, or maybe a creature. It was hard to tell. It sat at the center of the underwater city, pulsing with that green light, growing larger with each pulse. Fed by tubes or veins that connected to the cracks in the concrete, drawing something from our world into theirs. The camera's hydrophone picked up their communication, not language as we understand it, but harmonics that conveyed meaning directly to the brain. I had to stop watching the footage several times, my nose bleeding, my head feeling like it might split open. But I understood fragments. The barrier weakens. 7,700 rotations complete. The surface dwellers have forgotten the treaty. Time to reclaim the upper waters. Then, at minute 43, something looked directly at the camera. It had been human once. I could see traces of a Park Service uniform fused into its translucent skin. It spoke in English in Patricia Mills' voice. "Tom, you found us." "Good. You need to understand, we didn't disappear. We were recruited. The city needs interpreters, beings that can exist in both states. The concrete wasn't meant to imprison them, it was meant to give us time. Time to evolve, time to adapt, time to prepare for coexistence." The figure that had been Patricia moved closer to the camera. The entity that emerged in 1942 wasn't an invasion. It was an ambassador. They've been here longer than humans, Tom. This is their planet, too. We just forgot the agreement our ancestors made. But they remember. They always remember. The seal will fail in 72 days. When it does, they'll rise. Not to conquer, but to reclaim their place in the upper world. The question is, will humanity remember how to share? Or will we fight a war we can't win against beings that were ancient when our species was young? Then something massive moved past the camera, a tentacle or appendage the size of a subway train, covered in eyes that each reflected a different version of reality. The camera shook, sparked, and died. 72 days. That gave us until late August 2005. I tried to warn people, sent the footage to news stations, government agencies, anyone who might listen. Most ignored it as a hoax. The few who took it seriously disappeared within days, their existence scrubbed from records as thoroughly as Patricia's had been. Dr. Webb called me into his office on July 1st. "Tom," he said, those inhuman eyes studying me, "you've seen what's below. You understand what's coming. We'd like to offer you a choice." "What kind of choice?" "Join us. Undergo the transition. Become a bridge between worlds. Or stay human and watch your species struggle to comprehend what's about to happen. You're one of them?" He smiled, his face briefly flickering to show something else underneath. Scales, gills, the suggestion of tentacles. "I'm both. I volunteered in 1987 when we first understood what was down there. The government has been preparing, Tom. Not for war, but for integration. Some of us have already changed, already adapted. We're the translators, the peacekeepers for what's coming. And if I refuse, then you continue your work with our blessing. Document what happens. Be a witness. Someone needs to record the truth, even if most won't believe it. I chose to remain human, to remain a witness." Webb seemed unsurprised, almost approving. "The old man of the lake chose you," he said cryptically. "It doesn't guard the seal, it guards the stories. When it finally sinks, someone needs to remember why. Over the next 2 months, I documented everything. The increasing seismic activity beneath the lake, the growing cracks in the concrete visible even from the surface on calm days. The strange behaviors of animals around the lake, birds flying in impossible patterns, fish swimming in perfect spirals, insects forming geometric shapes that hurt to perceive. I also researched the history Patricia had mentioned, the treaty, and I found it, hidden in Klamath oral traditions that anthropologists had dismissed as mythology. According to legend, when the earth was young, 2 peoples inhabited it, those who walked in the sun and those who swam in the deep. They fought a great war that nearly destroyed both. Finally, a treaty was made, the surface for the sunwalkers, the deep places for the others. Crater Lake was one of the boundary points, a place where both worlds touched, where representatives could meet. But humans forgot. We always forget. We filled the oceans with noise, drilled into the deep places, and broke the treaty we didn't remember signing. The deep ones waited, patient as stone, for the appointed time to renegotiate. That time was measured in cycles of 7,700 years, the exact age of Crater Lake. On August 15th, 2005, I positioned myself on Wizard Island with my cameras, my recording equipment, and enough supplies for a week. I wasn't alone. Other witnesses had gathered, scientists who'd been discredited, journalists who'd asked too many questions, locals who'd always known something was wrong with the lake. We formed an unlikely congregation, waiting for apocalypse or revelation. At 3:33 a.m. on August 22, 2005, it began. The lake itself seemed to inhale, the water level dropping 5 feet in seconds. Then came the sound, like the earth itself groaning, like tectonic plates singing, like every whale song ever sung played simultaneously. The concrete seal didn't break. It dissolved, the material transforming into something organic that was absorbed by the water. And they rose, not as invaders, not as monsters, but as beings returning home after a long exile. They emerged slowly, allowing our eyes to adjust, our minds to process. First came the small ones, jellyfish-like creatures that floated through air as easily as water, their bioluminescence painting the night in colors that don't have names. Then the medium ones, things like octopi made of living metal, crawling onto the shores with movements that were somehow graceful despite their alienness. Finally, the large ones, the beings that had built the city below. They stood 30 feet tall, their bodies constantly shifting between states, solid, liquid, plasma, and something else our physics doesn't describe. They had faces, after a fashion, that conveyed intelligence, patience, and something that might have been sadness. One of them approached our group on Wizard Island. When it spoke, the words formed directly in our minds, in whatever language we understood best. We are the dwellers. We were here first, we'll be here last. The treaty was broken, but we offer renewal. Share the waters with us, as your ancestors did. Learn from us, as we will learn from you. Or fight us and lose everything, as those before you nearly did. The government response was swift, but not what I expected. Within hours, military vehicles surrounded the lake, but they didn't attack. Instead, they established a perimeter, containing not the dwellers, but the information. The cover story was already being broadcast. Toxic algae bloom, lake temporarily closed, nothing to see here. Dr. Webb appeared beside me, no longer hiding his true nature, a hybrid of human and dweller, his body flickering between states. This is how it begins, he said, not with invasion, but with integration. Slowly, carefully, letting humanity adjust. Some will accept it immediately. Others will take generations. But the truth is out now, even if it's hidden. The lake has 2 craters again, 2 peoples, 2 futures intertwining. But the dwellers had underestimated human fear and ignorance. On August 30th, a rogue military unit led by a general who believed the dwellers were demons attempted to drop a nuclear device into the lake. The bomb never reached the water. The old man of the lake, that ancient sentinel, suddenly sank after 120 years of floating. As it descended, it transformed, not a log at all, but a vessel, a prison, containing something that made even the dwellers recoil. What emerged from the old man was neither human nor dweller, but something else. A guardian left by whatever civilization had originally brokered the treaty. It spoke in all languages simultaneously. The compact holds. Any who break it face erasure. The nuclear device vanished. Not exploded, not disarmed. Erased from existence. The rogue general and his unit forgot why they were there. Forgot what they'd planned, forgot the dwellers existed. Only those of us who'd accepted the truth retained our memories. That's when I understood. The real secret of Crater Lake wasn't the dwellers, or the second crater, or the concrete seal. It was the guardian in the old man, the enforcer of a treaty older than human civilization. It had been watching, waiting, ensuring both sides honored the agreement. And now that the treaty was being renewed, it would continue watching. The dwellers returned to the lake mostly. Some remained on the surface, working with the government to establish formal relations. The lake was reopened to tourists within a month, though the North Quadrant remained restricted. Visitors came, took pictures, never noticing the shadows moving beneath the surface, never seeing the lights deep below that pulsed in patterns that were almost language. But some of us know, some of us watch, some of us document. Because this is just the beginning. Crater Lake was the first point of contact, but there are others. Every deep lake, every ocean trench, every cave system that goes down far enough eventually connects to their realm. The dwellers are everywhere beneath us, have always been there, waiting for humanity to mature enough to accept that we're not alone on Earth. We never were. I'm recording this final testimony from a location I can't disclose, 18 years after the events of August 2005. If you're watching this, it means the second phase has begun, and the world needs to know what really happened at Crater Lake, and what's about to happen everywhere else. The integration appeared successful at first. The dwellers kept to the deep waters, only occasionally surfacing at night when the tourists were gone. The government created a new classification, Ultra Blue, higher than Top Secret, specifically for dweller-related operations. I was recruited as a civilian advisor, one of the few humans who'd had direct contact and retained their sanity. But by 2010, things started to go wrong. It began with the missing research team. 5 scientists from the Ultra Blue program descended to the Dweller City in a specially designed submersible. They were supposed to stay for 48 hours. They never came back. The Dwellers claimed they'd chosen to undergo transformation, but the video feed told a different story. In the final transmission, the team was screaming about the ones below the Dwellers, about something older and hungrier that the Dwellers themselves feared. That's when I learned the truth about the hierarchy of the deep. The Dwellers weren't the first inhabitants of Earth's hidden places. They were refugees themselves, fleeing from something they called the primordials, beings that existed before physics settled into its current configuration, when reality was more fluid, more alive. The Dwellers had sealed the primordials away, deeper than deep, in places where even they feared to go. But our drilling, our seismic surveys, our curious exploration had weakened those seals too. Dr. Webb, increasingly more dweller than human, took me to the lake one night in September 2015. We descended in a biomechanical craft that was part submarine, part living organism. The journey to the Dweller City was remarkable enough. Breathing walls, navigation by thought, pressure that should have killed us, but didn't. But Webb took us deeper, to the original bottom of Crater Lake, below the Dweller City, to a place they called the First Seal. It was a massive disk of material that wasn't quite matter, covered in symbols that hurt to perceive directly. And it was cracking. Not physically, cracking in dimensions we don't have words for. Through those cracks, I could see/feel, taste something that made the Dwellers seem as familiar as house cats by comparison. This is why we really surfaced, Webb explained, his voice a harmony of human and alien tones, not to reclaim territory but to warn you, to prepare you. The primordials are waking. Every nuclear test, every fracking operation, every deep core sample has been like an alarm clock to them. We estimate you have had perhaps 50 years before they break through. What happens when they do? Webb's form shuddered, a fear response that transcended species. Reality becomes negotiable. Physical laws become suggestions. They don't destroy worlds. They unwrite them, remake them according to rules that predate logic. That's when the government made the decision that changed everything. Operation Deep Seal was authorized in 2016. The plan was insane. Detonate precisely controlled nuclear devices at strategic points around the globe, not to destroy the primordials, but to fuse the geological barriers holding them back. Turn the Earth's crust into a prison of melted rock and radiation. The dwellers agreed to help, not because they trusted us, but because the alternative was worse. I was part of the observation team at Crater Lake when they tested the first device. Not in the lake, that would have been too dangerous, but in the deepest part of the Mariana Trench. The explosion was unlike anything our models predicted. It didn't just fuse rock, it fused space-time itself, creating a barrier that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It worked. The primordial signatures went quiet. The cracks in the first seal began to heal, but there was a cost. The barriers we created didn't just keep the primordials in, they kept everything in. The dwellers found themselves trapped, unable to move between deep places as they had for millions of years. Crater Lake became not a meeting point but a prison. They didn't take it well. The first sign of dweller retaliation came in 2018. Every fish in Crater Lake died simultaneously, floating to the surface in a pattern that spelled out a message in a dozen languages. You have betrayed the treaty. Then came the dreams. Everyone who'd ever swum in Crater Lake began having the same nightmare. Drowning in air, breathing water, their bodies transforming against their will. The suicide rate in Oregon tripled. The Park Service closed the lake indefinitely, citing environmental concerns. But the real horror began in 2020. The dwellers had found a way to broadcast. Using the water itself as a medium, they could send signals through any body of water connected to the global system. Drink a glass of tap water, and you might hear their whispers. Take a shower, and you'd see glimpses of their city. Swim in any lake or ocean, and you risked being pulled into their reality. The government tried everything. Chemical treatments, electromagnetic barriers, even attempting to drain Crater Lake entirely. Nothing worked. The dwellers weren't just in the water. They were the water, existing in states of matter we couldn't separate or contain. That's when they made the offer that brings us to today. In 2023, a dweller envoy surfaced, not at Crater Lake, but simultaneously in every major body of water on Earth. The message was simple: release us or join us. The primordials wake regardless. Together, we might survive. Divided, we all become nothing. They gave humanity 1 year to decide. That year is up tomorrow. I've spent the last 12 months traveling to every deep place I could reach, documenting what I found. Lake Baikal in Russia, where Soviet experiments had accidentally opened a door they couldn't close. Loch Ness in Scotland, where what people thought was a monster was actually a dweller scout that had been trapped for centuries. The cenotes of Mexico, where Mayan priests had made their own treaty with the Deep Ones, a treaty that expired with their civilization. Every deep place tells the same story. We are not alone. We never were. And the things that share this planet with us are losing patience with our ignorance. The government has prepared 3 options for tomorrow. Option 1, full release. Remove all barriers, free the dwellers, and hope they'll help us face the primordials when they eventually break free. Risk: the dwellers might not forgive our betrayal. Option 2, total war. Use every weapon we have to eliminate the dwellers before they can act. Risk: we probably can't win, and even if we do, we face the primordials alone. Option 3, transformation. Accept the dwellers' offer to join them, to evolve into something that can survive what's coming. Risk: we won't be human anymore. I know which option the government has chosen. I've seen the preparation, the staging areas around every major lake, the submarines moving into position above ocean trenches. They're going with option 2. They're going to fight. It's a mistake. I've made my own choice. Tonight, I returned to Crater Lake one last time. Not as a human, not as a dweller, but as something in between. A bridge. A translator for what comes next. The transformation isn't painful, Patricia told me in my dreams. It's like being born again, but remembering everything, understanding everything. The old man of the lake has reformed, risen from the depths where it sank. But now I know what it really is. Not a guardian, not a prison, but a cocoon. Inside it, something has been growing for 7,700 years, waiting for the right moment to emerge. That moment is tomorrow. If you're watching this, you need to make your own choice. Fight, flee, or transform. There's no wrong answer, only consequences. But know this. The age of humanity's dominance over Earth is ending. What comes next depends on whether we can learn to share this planet with beings older, stranger, and perhaps wiser than ourselves. Look for the signs. Water that flows upward. Fish that swim in perfect spirals. Reflections that show cities that aren't there yet. These are invitations, opportunities to see the world as it really is before it's too late to adapt. Crater Lake is ground zero, but every body of water deeper than 1,000 feet is a potential breach point. The dwellers are everywhere, waiting. The primordials are deeper still, stirring. And humanity stands at the threshold of evolution or extinction. I've hidden copies of all my research, all the evidence, in 12 locations around the world. The coordinates are encoded in the migration patterns of birds around Crater Lake this year. The dwellers taught me that, how to hide information in living systems. If the government suppresses this video, if I disappear, others will find the truth. My final dive is in 3 hours. I can already feel the change beginning. My cells remembering their aquatic origins. My consciousness expanding to perceive dimensions beyond the standard 4. It's terrifying and beautiful, like seeing color for the first time after a lifetime of blindness. To whoever finds this recording, Crater Lake's second crater was never about keeping something in or out. It was about keeping two worlds separate until both were ready to merge. That time is now. The concrete seal wasn't a barrier, it was a timer, designed to dissolve after exactly 63 years, when both species had developed enough to attempt coexistence. We failed the first test. The dwellers extended their hand, and we responded with fear and violence. But there's still hope. The transformation they offer isn't death, it's evolution. Adaptation to a universe far stranger and more populated than we ever imagined. The water is calling. Not just at Crater Lake, but everywhere. In your tap, in your blood, in the clouds above. We are already part water, already part dweller. The transformation won't make us alien, it will make us complete. If you choose to remain human, document everything. Be witnesses to the change. Your stories, your memories, your purely human perspective will be invaluable to whatever civilization emerges from this convergence. If you choose to fight, know that you're fighting for an idea of humanity that was always an illusion. We were never alone, never separate from the rest of Earth's biosphere. The dwellers are our cousins, separated by millions of years of divergent evolution. The primordials are our ancestors. The first experiments in consciousness on this planet. If you choose to transform, find the nearest deep water. The dwellers will know you're coming. The process takes 3 days: dissolution, reconfiguration, emergence. You'll retain your memories, your personality, but gain so much more. The ability to exist in multiple states, to perceive time as a navigable dimension, to communicate through pure thought. This is Tom Gallagher, former U.S. Navy SEAL, former Park Service diver, soon to be something without a name, signing off from the rim of Crater Lake. The sun is setting, turning the water to liquid gold. The old man of the lake is moving again, spiraling toward the center where the second crater waits, and deep below, in the city that shouldn't exist, 10,000 dwellers are singing a song of welcome or warning. I'll know which soon enough. The next time someone tells you Crater Lake is just a volcanic caldera filled with rainwater, remember this: we put 50,000 tons of concrete down there for a reason, and when it failed, we discovered that the real question wasn't what we were keeping in, but what we were keeping out, and whether we ever had the right to keep anything at all. The water remembers everything, and soon, if you choose, you can remember with it. See you in the deep.